Hey everybody, my name is Lauren Smith and I want to welcome you to the F.Serious podcast. Now I know what you're thinking, what is this podcast all about? Well, early in my life, I thought to be successful, you had to take it really seriously. Since then, I've realized you don't. And life is about failing and trying and failing and trying. And you don't have to take yourself too seriously. You don't have to worry about impressing others. And the people that are on this podcast that I'm interviewing will show you exactly how you can incorporate fun and play into your successful life that you have. So I'm really excited to share this with you and enjoy the interview. Cool. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the F.Serious show, where we impress people not just by the goals we achieve and how smart we are, but also by how much fun we're having along the way. Our goal is to explore the power of play in success. And my guest today is Kevin Theriot. Kevin worked for LDS Family Services as a family marriage counselor for about 40 years, and he retired 2 years ago. He worked with all sorts of people with anxiety, depression, addictions, marital challenges, burnout, secondary traumatic stress disorder, and I'm sure much more. He earned his bachelor's degree at Brigham Young University. He earned his master's degree at Arizona State University. He earned his doctoral degree at ASU while working full-time. And I've known Kevin for at least 30 years, probably longer. He's a great person, husband, dad, and grandpa, and I just want to thank you for being on the show.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
So the reason I brought Kevin on is because I've always looked up to how he's been able to incorporate fun and play into his life. And in one, probably my favorite example that I can think of is at church, which is usually a pretty serious place. He was teaching a lesson to the older men, and it was a fast Sunday, so they weren't they didn't eat, most of them, that day to fast. And he dressed up as the devil and cooked bacon in front of them while teaching the lesson. So I think I remember right. Is that true?
Yes, that's pretty accurate.
Okay, so why did you do that?
Well, I think that in my non-professional life, I like to challenge people's thinking. With that lesson, for instance, what I was attempting to do is give the devil's side of the story. And and try and illustrate how he might approach life and happiness and that kind of thing. Obviously, I'm not the first person to ever think of doing that, but there are other rather famous people that have done something similar. But it's interesting, here you sit, 20 years later, and you still remember. And the thing about me is I'm the same way. I mean, if someone can stimulate me to think in a way that I've never looked at something before, then I tend to remember it. In my profession, we call it reframing. And it's a CBT or cognitive behavioral therapy kind of an approach to helping people. So, yeah, no, I remember it. You're pretty accurate. And
how would this be a reframe?
Well, again, oftentimes we try and look for happiness in a number of different places and in a number of different ways. And, if I could reduce this to a God-Satan conversation, Satan is all about making us unhappy. And if I can illustrate that, it's like when I've done that lesson 2 or 3 times over the years because it does cause people to think. And I would say something like, Satan, in the context of being Satan, I would say, you feel happy when you look at that porn site. What isn't life all about being happy? And of course, people think, well, yeah, I do. My heart rate goes up, and I do experience all of these, dopamine hits and other things going on in my brain, and I do feel great, But of course, Satan doesn't talk about the aftermath and the consequence to society and to the actors and to your relationships with other people and blah 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 blah. He leaves all that out, uh, and uh, and of course that's what I'm trying to get you to think about in that kind of a lesson. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it helps us see it from a different angle, I think, is
Yeah.
what you're saying. Yeah. Um, so I I have you on here not only because you are professionally smart and experienced with your clients, but also because you have been able to embody this fun and playful spirit in your own life. Where does that come from?
Well, it's interesting in the field of mental health. Of course, we study a lot about happiness and trying to find happiness in our lives. And one of my hobbies over the years has been to try and sit down and talk with older people, sadly, of which I am one today, um, and pick their brain.
I'm talking to you.
Pick their brain and say, hey, what have you discovered during the course of your life? And typically, these people are over 70 years of age, and they have a lot of life experience, and they seem to be happy, and so after talking with I guess hundreds at this point in my life of people in that age bracket who seem to have found happiness, one of the consistent answers, and this isn't the only answer, and it probably is, and it isn't even the number one answer, but one of the answers that typically ranks up at the top of the list is being genuine, being your genuine self. All of us have to be disingenuous at times. What that means is I have to maintain a facade or an appearance. For instance, in therapy, there's no joking around there. I mean, I'm just very serious. I'm trying to understand what my patient is going through or what they've been through. And oftentimes those are some of the most horrendous experiences you can imagine. And that's not a time for levity, joking, lightheartedness. That's a time for me to be paying very much attention and being empathetic and caring and interested and concerned about what they're going through. And they expect that of me, and I expect that of me. Okay, so my point is there are situations where I have to put on that facade or that role of being something other than absolutely genuine. Now that doesn't mean that I'm not caring and sensitive. No, that's part of me. But as you notice, I can be pretty out there sometimes when it comes to, being funny and causing people to think in ways they are, I guess I would say, non-traditional ways. The But to come back to your question, after talking with all of these older people, they said the more genuine you can be, the more consistent you can be with what's on the inside shows up on the outside, the happier you'll be. And being full of life experience now, I absolutely agree with them. When I can be genuine, when I can be, the person that that you see on the outside is the same person on the inside, uh, to me, that is a key to being happy. I went to a funeral one time of a friend, and one of his sons stood up and said, you guys know my dad. And he said, I want you to know what you saw was my dad. He is the most genuine person I've ever known in my life. And I listened to that and I thought, dang, I hope Lauren can stand up and say that at my funeral someday. Or any of my friends or any of my children. I wish they could say that. And I started to think, I want to be that. And if there's a part of me I don't like when I look in the mirror, then my goal is to get rid of that. If I don't like me being a certain way, if I don't like me being angry, if I don't like me being impatient, if I don't like me, with whatever, then I need to get rid of that so that I can be absolutely genuine. And again, I'm going to agree with the older people I've talked with that being that way is so much easier, to live that way and to be that way. And there are people who don't like that, and that's okay. Okay, it's like, if you don't like who I am, that's okay, and we don't have to see eye to eye on everything, and yet I hope we can still be friends. Okay, even though I may be very different than you. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I want to go deeper on a couple of things there, kind of unpack them. So, in talking to these older people, which you now classify yourself as, which, by the way, if I get in, I will definitely go to your funeral, and if they want me to say that, I will. But
I'll put you on the list then.
Good. I think you have some say in it, as long as you do it now. So you talk about being genuine. Is it easy? I mean, from your experience, but you also know from working with people. Like, I feel like my genuine is playful. Like, I like being playful. Like, I like to play with my kids. I don't like taking things very seriously. Usually when somebody is talking about something, I double think it into something more funny. And I may or may not say that out loud, but that's kind of where my brain goes. But I like being playful. I like, not being super serious. But I imagine not everybody's like me or like you. So how does somebody navigate what their genuine is?
Well, I am the first one to raise my hand and say that I am so lucky to be blessed with a spouse that can give me excellent feedback. And she is more serious than I am, most of the time. And she can tell me when I'm crossing a line and when I shouldn't be quite as playful, when I shouldn't be quite as joking, when I shouldn't be blah blah blah, and I listen to her because I trust her judgment. Now that doesn't mean I always do what she suggests. She suggested I not dress up as Satan and do that lesson. And yet, I listened, and I decided to disagree and go ahead. And thank heavens it turned out pretty good, But I listened to her. I listened to her with intent, because I do trust her judgment. And, sadly, probably 80-90% of the time she's right, and I shouldn't have done whatever she suggested. I just happened to win on that particular one. But, to come back to your question, how do I negotiate that? How do I know when to be playful and when to tone it down a few notches?
Or how did you know that that was your genuine self? Or was it a process of figuring it out? Was it a decision you made? Where did that originate from?
Well, and here you get into, and the question of personality development becomes a fascinating one in my field of science. There are three, at least you and I, because we share the same faith tradition, I would argue there are three possible explanations for personality development. One is what we call nature. In other words, it's genetically inbred into my personality. I have an uncle that has a very similar sense of humor, and he and I get along great. The rest of the family kind of look at us and think we're really weird, but we laugh at each other's jokes. We have a great time. And I would say genetically, it's obvious I'm related to the guy. The other is nurture. In other words, the things that I am, I've learned how to be. For instance, as a very insecure uh, person growing up, and I think we're all insecure to a great extent. The question isn't if, it's how much. But feeling very insecure, I learned that making people laugh brought me attention. Okay, and kind of was something I enjoyed, making people laugh and that kind of thing. And so one could argue my environment taught me how to do that. And then the third possible explanation, and this is where we start talking about our faith. And I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we believe in a life prior to this one. We refer to it as our pre-mortal life. And I believe, and our church teaches that we have personalities there. And even though there's a veil that's drawn across our memory and we can't remember that life, I believe we all bring with us certain personality characteristics from that experience as well. I have 5 kids. Each of them have a very distinct and different personality from one another. And yet they all had the same genetic parents. They all had the same environmental background, more or less. They were exposed to the same parenting. And yet they all have very different personalities. And so it's like, how did that happen? But, to come back to your question, how did I get to be that way? I think it's a little bit genetic, a little bit social learning, and a little bit this premortal life that I refer to. It's a combination of all three that create the personality I have. And then, of course, you hone it over the years. It's interesting to me that, you saw me 30 years ago, and then you've watched me over those 30 years. And I hope I've changed a little bit. Some of it good, some of it not so good, but change and growth is what it's really all about during our lifetimes. And I'm expressing opinions today that ask me 10 years from now, and I may disagree with me because I'm changing, I'm growing, I'm developing. Am I answering your question?
Yeah. So if you had a client, or you call them patients,
Clients, whatever. Yeah. I call them
come
people.
to you, people. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm having a hard time being genuine, what would you suggest?
I would encourage them. Well, first I would explore what that meant to them, because I think it means something different to all of us. Okay. I think that oftentimes when people will say that to me, what they're saying is, I'm fearful that if I let people see who I really am, they won't like me. And so how do I be that person? My first answer would be, do you like you? Okay. There are parts of me I don't like. There are parts of me I wish I could do away with. I think, and here at the risk of too much self-revelation, but I think it's a challenge that most of us as men have, is when I look upon a woman, I want to not see her as a thing, okay? I don't want to see her as a sexual object. I don't want to see her as something I can exploit, something I can use to my own good. I want to see her as a person. And yet, when we get into sexual attraction and all that kind of stuff, it's like, I have to fight against that, to really look at her as a person. And it's interesting, of course, as I get to know that woman, I start to look upon her less and less as a thing and more as a person. And so it's not just changing me, it's changing the dynamic of that relationship with that person that can help me be the genuine person I want to be. Once they're my friend and someone that I know really well, it changes the dynamic of that. I think that, and there are other things that also play into this. When you're a supervisor, you tend to have certain goals that your employer wants you to accomplish. If you're employed by some organization, or if you're self-employed, obviously your bottom line, you want to make money, and sometimes that can create an interesting challenge for you in being genuine. Can you genuinely care about your employees, and yet still fire them? Okay, if they're not producing, if they're not helping, if they're not achieving whatever you need them to achieve, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But your question of, if someone comes to me and says, I want to be more genuine, how do I do that? First of all, I would explore and say, well, what does genuine mean to you? And who are you genuinely? Not the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the good. Who do you want to be? And then we would go and work with, well, how do you display the good? And how do you work internally at eradicating the bad? So that when you are being a genuine you like who you are. Okay, you like that person that you believe is your genuine self. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So liking yourself seems like a big thing. Also, from what you explained, it sounds very much like a process to maybe sharpen or hone what genuine means to you. Maybe as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about, like, I think of all of us have different values in our life. There's different things that we value. Like, for example, there's people that really love animals, like love them. I'm cool with animals. I like animals. But I'm not thinking about animals a lot. And so my genuine self may not be like, I'll pet my dog, but I don't like petting other people's dogs as much. I just don't. So anyway, I was just trying to navigate, like, okay, well, we all kind of innately probably have some of this, but you mentioned, like, people that are supervisors, they may have to develop in certain skills of being genuine in kind of relating to people. So I'm just kind of, am I on the right track, I guess is what I should ask you.
Well, again, there are situations that are challenging to when it comes to being your genuine self. There are other situations that aren't. I'm just trying to think this through. You talk about a difference in dogs, and I was trying to think of a difference in people. This uncle that I refer to, who has a sense of humor very similar to mine, he's since passed away, but he was homosexual. And he really helped me to develop a love, appreciation, comfort level. I'm not sure what you want to call it, but with being involved with the homosexual community. Now I'm straight, okay, and so I'm different than him, but because I knew him, and was exposed to that difference of perspective, it didn't really affect me and or how I view him. Whereas I don't know many transsexual people, and I don't understand transsexuals nearly as much, and so my comfort level with that is a lot less. Would it be made better if I were around them more? I don't know. But I think that, to be just totally genuine, I have to acknowledge that yes, there are differences. I might, like you say, I might like my dog, but I'm not sure I like your dog, kind of a thing. I like what's familiar to me, but things that are unfamiliar to me, I might have to work on and struggle with to figure out what is my genuine reaction to that. Okay, it doesn't mean necessarily that I'm going to love all dogs or that I'm going to love all people. I mean, one of my colleagues on a TED Talk tried to make a case for because pedophiles were born that way, we should embrace them and love them. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's ever going to take place within me. I mean, it's not that I hate them, but I definitely don't like what they're doing. And I am going to, be pretty judgmental of those that don't extinguish that behavior from who they are. And so, we all have lines of things that we feel comfortable and uncomfortable with, and that's okay. As long as we're genuine, as long as we first and foremost admit it to ourselves and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this, or I am comfortable with this, and then we have to look at our surroundings and decide, can I be genuine in this situation? And if I can't, then maybe I should avoid that situation. Or if I can't avoid the situation, then maybe I better learn to somehow understand it better so I can be comfortable with it.
Well, I think back to being genuine, I think you could almost use the word integrity as well, but I like the word genuine because I feel like genuine is like we can talk about like the silly side of us, and that being genuine, it's not just like a promise that we keep or something. It's kind of just how we want to be in the world. Now,
I would agree with that.
I I try to be genuine, but there are certain situations where it's harder, I feel, to be genuine. And I think a lot of those situations I may be trying to impress somebody, or I care about what other people think. What, in those situations where it's not like when you were meeting with your clients, patients, people, it's a kind tact to take their whatever they got going on seriously. Right? That's a kind thing to do in that situation. There are certain situations where I'm not genuine, not because I'm trying to be kind. It's because I'm scared or something, like of being my authentic self. So how do you navigate those situations? Like if that it's not just out of kindness, it's out of fear that you're not being genuine.
Well, I think your question is profound, because I think while it, it while there may be some, it's hard for me to imagine anyone that doesn't have the experience you're describing. Okay, I think we all find ourselves in those situations, and the fear typically is of rejection or being judged harshly by whomever we're talking to, and or not fitting in, which is, I guess, another way of saying being rejected. But first, we have to identify what is the fear and is it real? Okay. In my closest interpersonal relationships, which I would describe as the relationship I have with my spouse, the relationship I have with my adult children, the relationship I have with certain very, very close friends, I would suggest that in those closest of relationships, my goal is to get rid of the fear. Or there's a book that I like. The title of it is "Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway." Okay, can I share with my spouse, with my adult children, with my closest of friends, who I am, and see, are you going to still accept me? Or are you going to reject me? I mean, in my opinion, at some point you have to put that to the test in order to find happiness in those relationships. And ideally, of course, you're successful and you discover that, wow, they can still love me in spite of my idiosyncrasies, in spite of my weaknesses and shortcomings, you know, and that's a very powerful thing, to feel that. It's interesting. They did a research study years ago on couples that had been married 50 years or more, and they did this study because the number one reason stated in court papers today for divorce is irreconcilable differences. In other words, there are things we just could never see eye to eye on. And so they did a study of these couples that had been married 50 years, and they asked them, how many irreconcilable differences do the two of you have? And the average couple had 12. Okay? These are things they'd worked on for years trying to see eye to eye on. And they still, after 50 years of marriage, disagreed on at least 12 significant things. These are not where do you squeeze the tube of toothpaste. I mean, these are pretty significant things, like religious differences, political differences, financial differences. They had 12, and yet they were still able to love and accept each other in spite of those differences. They had learned how to get around them. And in my own marriage, my wife and I have been married 45 years, and I'd have to sit down and figure out how many irreconcilable differences we have. But we do, we have some. And, the thing that becomes fascinating about relationships is you've heard the metaphor of the glass half empty or half full. My wife and I can look at our relationship together and say, we're looking at what's in the glass, what's not in the glass. We're focused on what's there, what we agree on, what we look at and believe that are similar, if not exactly the same. And yet every relationship has those empty parts, and we're fearful, of those that, gosh, because we don't look at this the same way, are they going to reject us? And again, my argument is that no, people generally speaking, I think people can tolerate a great deal of difference. As long as they know you're not telling them they're wrong. Okay? My wife and I, with our differences, she knows. I'm not saying she's wrong. I'm just saying I don't see it that way. And in counseling, one of the things I do is I'll hold up something with two sides, and I'll ask the person I'll show the person one side of it, and I'll ask them to describe what they see. A coin comes to mind. And the person looking at it may say, well, I see heads. And I look at it and go, it's tails. And the example, of course, is it's both. And it's not that you're right and I'm wrong or vice versa. It's that when I can trust that even though I can't see what you see, even though I may not agree with it, I can value your perspective. I can value your opinion. I mean, one of the things that the country seems very divided on right now is abortion. Okay? And it's almost like if you're not for us, you're against us kind of a thing. Both camps, both the pro-life and the pro-abortion camp, they're both, arguing and saying, well, if you don't see it my way, then you're telling me I'm wrong. And it's like, no, it's just a difference in perspective. Okay, the real question comes as to when does that developing fetus, when should it be considered a sentient being? When should it be considered alive? And I would argue that's a fascinating question that even I'm not sure of. Okay, when is it when that cell first splits and becomes a zygote? Is that a sentient being? Is it at 14 weeks when it has, or 8 weeks when you can hear a heartbeat? Is it 14 weeks when, the brain is beginning to develop? Is it 20 weeks when the child could actually be born and survive? When does life begin? And then once you consider it alive, that's a whole other argument. Does a parent have control over the life of their child, meaning whether they live or die? And obviously our laws are very specific there and say, no parent has that right to put their child to death, kind of a thing. But my point is, I understand the pro-life or the pro-abortion. They call it pro-choice. Obviously, I'm pro-life, but they call it pro-choice. And it's like, if you consider it a part of a woman's body and it's not a living being, then of course she has control over that. And she can absolutely control what goes on in her body. But if you consider it a life, then absolutely not. Okay, because that's a living being, and no one has the right to kill someone else, kind of a thing. So I don't know. That just, the example comes to mind as something where people can have some very passionate feelings and perspectives on it, and yet it really is, a matter of perspective. And I respect the pro-choice perspective. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. Will I ever see it that way? No. But I understand it and I respect it. And if in this country the majority believe that it is not a living being, then I have to go along with that. Okay? I have to embrace that. And we have ever since 1972 or whenever the Roe versus Wade came into law. But now with our new technologies and understandings of the development of the fetus, that's the big question, is when does that massive tissue become a living being? And so, again, illustrating the concept that it's all oftentimes a matter of perspective and respecting each other's perspectives and realizing that just because I have a different one doesn't make me right and you wrong. It just means I have a different perspective. And in a democracy, of course, we all listen to each other and then we make a collective decision with the majority making the decision. And the minority agreeing to say, okay, that's the unanimous, or that's the majority perspective on this, and I'm going to learn how to live within that perspective.
Okay, so somebody is trying to, if they're afraid of being genuine, you talked about maybe sharing certain opinions they may have, or accepting other people's opinions. Is there a link, or do you think there's a link there between people that are open to other opinions being and them being genuine? I'm trying, because I see, I think I saw a quote once, I think it was Martin Luther King, and he talked about peace. There's like peace on the near side of understanding, and then there's peace on the far side of understanding. So peace being on the near side of understanding, meaning that it's more avoidance. So that there's a topic I don't want to talk about, and so my peace is that I don't talk about it. Or there's peace on the other side where I talk to people about it, and we come to, it may be a difference of opinion, but still there's peace. It just took work to get there. Anyway, I was just trying to think of, do you feel like there's a link to people being more open to share their, to be themselves if they're open to other people's opinions? Or do you get what I'm trying to get to? Like,
I would definitely agree with that last statement, that when people judge me to be inquisitive and wanting to know their opinion and understand it, I think it does encourage them to be more genuine. Ideally, I want to be around people that encourage me to be more genuine, okay? And display the same level of interest and respect for my perspective. I have many friends who, for instance, going back to the abortion thing, who are on the pro-choice side, and we're still great friends, okay? Because they listen to me and I listen to them, and even though we disagree, we certainly understand each other's perspectives. Now, there are environments, and again, that don't encourage genuineness, and it's not wrong to stay away from those environments. I would never go to Planned Parenthood and apply for a job, okay, because I don't feel like I could be genuine in that environment. Whereas, there are other environments. I could go work for Catholic Family Services in a heartbeat because, or Catholic Charities, I think they call it, because, we share a lot more commonalities, if that makes any sense. And so, by your comment of, well, let's not talk about it, there are environments that I don't want to put myself in because it would be really hard to be genuine and talk. But in my closest relationships, I don't have that luxury. In a job interview, I might have that luxury, but not in a marriage, for instance, because it's only a matter of time before we come to realize our perspectives, and that we have a certain number of irreconcilable differences.
So I feel like there's starting to be a little bit of a progression in my head around being genuine. I think you talked about nature, nurture, and choice, and kind of developing that within yourself. But a lot of that has to do with the people that you surround yourself with. So the people that you choose to be in your life, close relationships, because they're going to see your worst, probably the worst of you, and they're going to probably be able to give you the like my wife can give me the best feedback on who I'm being in a certain situation. But also outside of that, there's the groups I spend the most time with. And although I don't try to just shut people out of my life or whatever, I think there are choices of like just the types of people I do want to spend the most time with, and making choices related to that.
Well, here, choice goes two ways. I'm kind of chuckling as you talk, because it's like you do get to choose who you're going to hang around with, and who you feel like you can be the most genuine around. But they also have a choice.
Yeah.
And they may not like who you are. Okay, they may not like your genuine self. And you know what? That's okay, because sometimes life's too short. Now again, would I take that attitude with my wife or children? Never. Okay. I will work and work and work with them to find a healthy, happy place to be, like these 50-year marriages that have irreconcilable differences. And we'll try and negotiate. There are things that, one of the more trivial ones that my kids love to bring up if they ever want entertainment value to watch mom and dad go at it, is what's okay to do on the Sabbath day. Okay? Is it okay to do this, that, or the other thing? And my wife have some irreconcilable differences on that, on how we live our religion when it comes to Sabbath day observance. And we've compromised, and we've learned how to avoid things that are going to make each other feel uncomfortable. And so I won't do certain things, and she won't do certain things that she knows are just going to, like fingernails on a chalkboard, drive each other a little nuts. We learn that when we're outside of each other's presence, so to speak, it's okay to do that or not do that, as the case might be, on the Sabbath day. But when we're together, we try and respect each other's perspectives on what we should or shouldn't do, and we've learned to negotiate that. However, with casual relationships, I'll look at you and go, you know what, Lauren, did you like me dressing up as Satan? Or are you going to be on my case for 30 years for dressing up as Satan and coming to church? And if you don't like it, it's like, okay, that's okay. We don't have to hang out. Okay, you can choose not to hang out with me, uh, and not to be a really close friend. That's okay. And as you age and as you have more control over your life, you know, uh, what you find is that you have this core support system that surrounds you of people that are okay with you, uh, for the most part. Nobody's 100% okay with everybody. But for the most part, it's like, people have learned, yeah, okay, here's Kevin dressing up as Satan again, kind of thing. And it's like, yeah, they get a chuckle out of it, and we're okay because they think it's funny or they think it's a fascinating way to drive home a point. Um, and the people that don't like that, they've learned to move on and they don't include me in their circle of friends, and that's okay with me, kind of a thing. So,
Is that is I see that that could be painful, right? Like that rejection.
well, and here you
But
here you get into, one of the fascinating things, as a mental health professional, that I encourage people to look at as they're examining, uh, who they are. It's like, do you have a core group of friends? Do you have people that have liked you your entire life? Do you have a good emotional support system? And if the answer to that is yes, then I would go, great. You're doing great. Be your emotional self, and my hunch is you're going to find out that they still like you. If somebody feels totally isolated and alone and they have no friends, and the friendships they have are fleeting, and they are having an extremely difficult time with having a relationship over 6 months with anybody, I'll look at them and go, maybe you need to change. Maybe you need to look at your core values and what it is that you're doing. That you may want to say, this genuine self isn't helping me much. If that makes any sense.
yeah, that makes sense. I was thinking about two things. One, that if you have a core group of people, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to be the same, right? It means that they're okay with however you want to be, even if you change over time, or whether it's your opinions, your beliefs, your who you want to be in the world, that sort of thing.
Well, and here I would
Um,
I would suggest we have some fascinating examples. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Jesus Christ. Did people want to be around them? And I would argue, yeah. People would gravitate to them. Why? Because they could feel that their genuine self was loving and kind. Toward who? Toward everyone. They didn't discriminate. They always tried to be loving and kind toward everyone, except the disingenuous people. I mean, even Jesus went after, certain groups of people that he felt were pretty disingenuous, and weren't kind and weren't loving, but were, classically judgmental and deceptive and exploitive. Jesus didn't put up with much of that. Okay. And I don't think Gandhi did either. And, maybe Mother Teresa did, but internally she didn't. I don't know Mother Teresa really well, or her history, but my hunch is that, when they could discern that someone was being, disingenuous and exploitive and cruel and unkind and blah blah blah, even those people whom we hold up as ideals, of being genuine, uh, not everyone liked them.
so one last thing I want if you could, um, so one big side of being genuine is fostering an environment of genuineness for, is that a word?
I think so.
Genuineness.
It is to us. I
Okay,
understand what you're saying.
so basically giving, I mean, that's the reason that I built this community. I want to give people the permission to be themselves, to, in my specific case, like the type of people I want to be, that have fun, be playful. um, how do you think we can foster that, um, that for other people, be an environment for other people to be genuine?
Well, again, just given my own experience in observing people, um, it's it doesn't take long to figure out if someone is being truly genuine, um, because they're the same person at home, at school, at play. I mean, they're consistent throughout their social environments, and again, it's not hard to see those people, and I love that kind of person. I'm drawn to that kind of person. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your positions are on a whole bunch of stuff. We can disagree on many things, but if I can always count on you to be genuine with me and give me your opinions, your perspectives, even though I may not agree with them or like them, uh, not only will I respect them, I'll respect you because you're taking a risk in doing that with me. You're risking our friendship. And it's like that allows me to also be genuine and talk to you and give you feedback. And again, uh, I like that kind of person because um, there's just no deceptiveness there. There's just no facade. It's really who they are. It's who I am. And you know, when someone can really like the real me, that feels so good. That feels so enriching. It adds to my my personal sense of happiness and well-being, um, and I strive to find those people. I strive to be that person, um, and you know um, so I guess that's how I would answer your question.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna end there. uh, I I know this was our second try at this, and I appreciate the second one. I really liked going deeper on, being genuine. I think that's a challenge for a lot of people, being themselves, feeling like, being accepted, and having opinions that may be, um, not shared by everybody around them. So
Well,
I think what.
if I could make a reference, my wife and I went and saw the movie Top Gun.
Uh
Okay,
huh.
and the character Tom Cruise played, Maverick. I mean, those who tried to supervise him and wanted him to fit a certain mold, uh, he never did, and it hurt him career wise. Uh, but we're all drawn to that kind of movie character. Why? Because it's like I want to be like that. I want to be that genuine person. And it doesn't matter if it forwards my career. It doesn't matter if people don't like me. Uh, there's power there, and that's why those kinds of movies draw us in. It's fascinating that way. We all want to be that way, but are you ready to accept the consequences of that? When it comes to, there are going to be people that aren't going to like you, and there are going to be people that are going to want to change you, and there are going to be people that, are going to have a really hard time with you. And yet, I'm going to suggest that when you get to the end of your life and you look back, I'm going to suggest that, I think Frank Sinatra sang a song about doing it his way. Again, all of those kinds of things play to that intuitive side of us that knows that to be that genuine person is where true, lasting happiness is going to come from. And again, that's one of several factors that goes into being happy. There are others, but that's definitely one of them.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thanks for your time. You're very wise and
whatever.
And I appreciate your insight.
That's in the eye of the beholder.
As a practitioner of having fun and being playful. So all you listeners, if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, have fun. Thank you for listening to this episode of the F.Serious podcast. I'm so excited that you made it to the end. We're going to have more for you soon. Stay tuned.